world is facing severe environmental issues like climate change, and we can no longer depend on fossil fuel. Renewable energy is regarded as the cleanest answer to solving the problem of fossil fuel depletion and environmental issues. The COP21, 21st Conference of the Parties, that was held in Paris reminded people of the importance. And it is now focused on as the most essential growth power in the next generation. World-renowned solar energy specialist and entrepreneur Alex Lightman joins us to discuss the development process of various renewable energy, including solar energy, and the future of the green industry.
Welcome to Korea. Tell us about your experiences so far and what brought you to Korea this time.
I came for the second Seoul Climate Energy Conference, which had the former Prime Minister of Korea, the former President of Indonesia, and a number of ministers and vice ministers and people from large companies talking about how to get ready for the United Nations COP21 conference that's happening in Paris starting in 10 days.
And what were some of the topics that were covered, and how are they relevant to the upcoming COP conference in Paris?
The conference opened up with a message from UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and wishing that the conference would come up with ideas and possibilities and bring them to Paris. Korea is a diplomatic giant. I remember once hearing Israel say that Brazil was a diplomatic dwarf. So I've always wondered what's the opposite of a diplomatic dwarf, and it's Korea. It's a country that has 50 million or so people, but has a big influence on the world stage, primarily through two people. One is the UN Secretary General being Korean, and the second is the United Nations IPCC, which won a Nobel Prize. The panel on climate change is also from Korea, and I sat and had lunch with him. So I guess I've been thrown into the deep end of the pool of all the people who are part of the diplomatic industrial complex of Korea who are seeking to find a way for people to work with climate change and with carbon taxes and so on. And Korea has had to learn to be diplomatic because when you have China to your west, Japan to your east, and North Korea to your north, and you have to learn to be a diplomat. And so it's fascinating to see people who do diplomacy as easily as they breathe. I found that fascinating.
Now, you mentioned at the conference the other day, I was there with you, you mentioned you have an idea for a new energy venture fund aimed at Korea. Can you say a little bit about what you had in mind?
Well, it's something different than that. I would like to have a fund. I'm working on raising a fund, and I wanted to have the Korean government and Korean industry match investments with me, and because Korea is very good at making something, making it really well, and getting it out to the world. So Korea right now is one of the leaders in making batteries. Now here it's very clever. Elon Musk is a very popular person. Right. In fact, I'm one of the big writers on Quora about Elon Musk. Right. So the question called "Why is Quora obsessed with Elon Musk?" It has 109,000 views. Right. I have almost 1 million views of my answers about Elon Musk. So he made the gigafactory for batteries and says batteries are big. In fact, what we need, if you consider one car-sized battery, the battery that's going to go into a Model S, we need the equivalent of 2 billion of those. Right. The gigafactory at its peak is only going to put out 500,000. We need hundreds of these factories. Yeah. And so the Korean government and Korean industry, LG and other companies have said, oh, big opportunity for batteries. So right now, the Korean government, if you're using solar and you have a factory, the Korean government will pay for half of your battery, as long as you're buying a Korean battery. So the Korean government is trying to jumpstart and kickstart Korea to get to maximum volume in batteries. It's a brilliant strategy that every country in the world could do it. Instead of competing for weapons, instead of competing for who has the best music, if we competed on who made the most efficient and cheap solar with batteries, we move at maximum speed towards the clean, disrupted world.
So you came from California?
Yes, I live in Santa Monica by the beach.
So it's my understanding you have a lot of experience with Silicon Valley as well.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the energy supply in California and how the mix is changing today.
Sure. Well, I actually spoke with a solar company today about this. Just 3 years ago, United States produced half of its electricity with coal.
Right.
But what's been happening with solar is as you add solar, you take away coal.
Right.
And so right now, California gets less than 1% of its electricity from coal because we do about half the solar installations of the whole United States just in California.
Right.
And we're preferentially getting coal out of our supply. I would be extremely surprised if we get any electricity from coal after the next year. So I feel very proud of that. And we're using more natural gas, we're using less nuclear, but basically the fuels that are adding up to roughly half of our capacity in the US or more are solar and wind.
So we're trying to move away from this dependency on fossil energy, and you spoke about the limits of fossil energy, resources, supplies, and also the impact of climate change. You focus mainly on solar energy. Are you also considering other possibilities? And why, particularly, is solar power your choice?
Well, I have three personas, three roles I play. And one role is as an entrepreneur. So I'm the chairman of 3 companies, and one of them makes solar trees and is coming out with solar appliances and batteries.
Tell me, what is a solar tree?
Sure, a solar tree is something that right now, if you want to have an innovation diffuse, there are these 5 rules that make an innovation diffuse, and one of them is the ability to test it, and another is the observability. That's actually what the technical term is. So I want to make solar more observable. And if solar is out in a giant installation in the desert where people only see it on their way to driving to Las Vegas, or it's only on the roof of a building where you're not going to see it unless you're actually flying in a jetpack or a helicopter, then that's not going to have the observability that makes it diffuse. So it's from the company Everblaze. Everblaze has made the Evertree. And if you're in Las Vegas, you can go outside Las Vegas City Hall or North Las Vegas City Hall, and you can see these basically solar panels on large trees. And it also has Wi-Fi, it has the ability to charge your phone. It's a platform for the delivery of municipal services.
Right, and about fossil fuels. What is it specifically about fossil fuels that our audience needs to know, and why is it critical to move so quickly away to these alternatives?
I would say there are 5 things people should know about fossil fuels. First of all, fossil fuels include oil, natural gas, and coal. The second thing is that we use a lot of water to extract them. So just natural gas alone, the extraction costs 4.5 trillion gallons of water. So we're talking about almost 1,000 gallons of water per person just to get the gas out of the ground. And to use a coal-fired power plant uses a lot of water. The third thing that's important to know is that there are major healthcare costs. So the number for the United States is $886.5 billion. You can put that into a search engine. You can find that number, and you'll find an article on Forbes. And what that means is that in the United States, where we have a minimum of $2.7 trillion a year for healthcare costs, 1/3 of our healthcare costs in the U.S. are due to use of fossil fuels.
Right.
So since we spend over $9,000 per person on healthcare, over $3,000 per person per year in the U.S. alone comes from healthcare due to fossil fuels. Now imagine a place in China where you have 20, 30, 40 times the safe limit of things from burning coal. And you have the 2.5 standard for particulate matter that get into people's lungs very deep. And you have cancer is the second leading cause of death in the U.S. after heart disease. And fossil fuels, exposing people to them will cause more cancer. It's 24% of all deaths. Another thing is that it causes more and more carbon dioxide in the air is exactly what causes the greenhouse effect. It traps heat. And so if you're trapping heat, you end up with things like a natural phenomenon like El Nino all of a sudden becomes a hot Korean spa bath the size of the Pacific Ocean. So I have seen not one, but two, but three hurricanes all forming over the Pacific, in satellite photos. So three hurricanes at the same time. It's never been observed in all of history. Right. And you have something like Super Typhoon Haiyan, which was rotating over the island of Leyte, which gives the Philippines 30% of its energy from geothermal, and it killed 10,000 people. It made 600,000 people homeless. And how many of those things can we deal with? What if we had one of those over Seoul? Now people say, oh, that's impossible, it can't happen. But there are things happening that have never been observed before in history. Who knows what would happen?
So there have been some efforts in Korea, of course, investment in Sejong City for solar energy facilities. And you, I believe, have visited some of these facilities.
I did.
In terms of the potential in Korea for renewable energy, for the energy industry and the market, what do you think is the potential if Korea seizes the moment?
I believe Korea has amazing potential for clean energy. Korea calls it new energy. We don't call it new energy in the United States, but I like that because at one point I was the main promoter in the world of the new Internet Protocol version 6. Right. And I wrote the first book on 4G wireless broadband. And the book was called Brave New Unwired World, the Digital Big Bang and the Infinite Internet. So I find that calling the conference The Road to Paris and the Green Big Bang to be very appropriate. Mm-hmm. So I think that Korea was the leader in the digital Big Bang, bringing wireless broadband internet to everybody. And I asked people, do you remember 10 years ago when you tried to use your phone and sometimes it wouldn't work in certain places? And they went, yes. And I said, so have you had that happen in the last year? And they go, no, my phone is working everywhere. That's because Korea is 10 years ahead of the United States in wireless. You're very good at it. You're the best in the world. My feeling is that Korea can take the same lessons learned by building the information architecture of the digital Big Bang and apply them to the green Big Bang, to apply them to the new energy Big Bang. And what I mean by that is that Korea was able to make an end-to-end architecture for bits. Bits are units of information, binary units, to go across from one person to another. Like you call on a mobile phone, it goes end-to-end. Well, what we're talking about with the green Big Bang is making an end-to-end architecture for electrons. And you want to tap it in, so instead of plugging into the wall, you're just plugging into the sun. So the sun is ultimately the source of the green Big Bang.
What were the innovations in terms of how those electrons were transported, how they were stored?
Well, the innovations are things that are actually really old technology.
Very interesting.
If you're talking about solar photovoltaics, it was invented in the 19th century. Humans have been using solar for 6,000 years. There's a book called Let It Shine, which is about 6,000 years of using solar. And the father of the modern solar photovoltaics is the greatest scientist of the 20th century, Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein in 1905 wrote a paper on the photoelectric effect. Exactly, that's correct. And so the photoelectric effect, which talks about one photon, which is a unit of electromagnetic energy, triggering one electron, is the basis for solar photovoltaics. But there are now people researching how to have one photon cause multiple electrons to be made available across different spectra of light. And so we're getting better and better at using light. Plant Labs in the Netherlands has found that if you just do red and one other color, that you can actually grow plants more. So that you can imagine you have a building, and instead of growing plants on the ground outside, you have a building with solar power at the top. And it's creating electricity which is used to run these LEDs, light-emitting diodes, which are only in one of the spectrum. Then you can actually grow more plants inside a building than you could outside. And that's how we can feed the world. So the ability to master new energy, the ability to master solar, is the ability to feed the world more inexpensively. It's the world where you can use solar for desalination, and you can provide water to people. You can provide light at night so that people don't have to go to bed when it gets dark, but they can read, they can study, they can learn, they can be prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. So I see it as something that will bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-not, the people who are not part of the grid. And I see a world in which everybody can basically have information, communication, and electricity almost for free.
So I want to make sure, understanding that grid, so when we think about smartphones, the internet, wireless, we think about something which consumes energy, not that produces energy. What has to change in order for that system to become a net positive? Exactly what is it that has to come together with solar power?
Well, I have a group on Facebook called Solar and the Internet of Energy.
Interesting.
And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about solar and the Internet of Energy. Where does it come from? I'm glad you asked. The sun is 1,000,000 times the size of Earth. It has 1,000 times the length, the breadth, and the height of Earth. So it's 1,000,000 times, but it's about 1/3 the density. It's about the density of a giant marshmallow. And if I was driving through the countryside of Korea today, and I saw these giant marshmallows all over the country. It was very funny. So every second, 600 million tons of hydrogen is fused together into 595 million tons of helium. And every gram of that matter, which is missing from there, releases an atomic bomb's worth of energy with the magic of another Einstein equation, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the coefficient of the speed of light squared. It takes, on average, 1,000 years for the photons, and my finger point is a photon, bouncing around inside the sun. All this happens within the 1/3 of the radius of the center of the sun. By the time it gets to the surface, though, it only takes 8 minutes to zip off to Earth. Now, you asked where the energy comes from. Only 1/billionth of the energy of the sun reaches Earth, but that's still 4 or 5 or 6,000 times as much energy as we use on Earth. Or another way to put it, the ex-head of MIT, Susan Hoxfield, said it, that we receive enough energy from the sun in the form of photons, which is electromagnetic energy, to power the Earth for a year. That is the most abundant source you have. And one thing that's very, very important, especially if we're talking about Korea, because we're in Seoul right now, outside that window is 25 million people, half the population, is that Korea imports 96% of its energy. No major industrial country imports as much. Nobody could benefit from this as much. Every time we flick a light switch, we have lights here for our taping of this interview, we're burning coal, we're burning uranium, we're burning natural gas. All those things are being burned. But when you have the sun, you're just consuming what's endlessly abundant there. You're not reusing it. Another thing about fossil fuels as it relates to this is that if you and I buy land next to each other, if I drill a well next to it and you drill a well next to mine, if every bit of the well that I extract, there's less for you. There's less for anybody else. And the costs go up. So this may sound very strange, but I worked my way through MIT as a roughneck drilling for oil.
Really?
I did, yeah. And I was a drilling engineer, and I broke my fingers. My fingers look a little bit weird because of being crushed under pipe. So I paid my dues, and I can talk about drilling as a person who earned the right to talk about that by my pain and my injuries and getting hot mud splashed in my face during the day. And if you look at what's happening with drilling, it's gotten more expensive. So my company was getting paid less than $1 million a well to drill our wells. It was Mitchell Energy and Development, which later became the pioneer of fracking, coincidentally. And now wells are about $15 million a piece. So this is basically an inverse learning curve. It's a negative learning curve. You get dumber and it gets more expensive. You do less and less with more and more over time. And so now the average well took enough water that we filled a football field with the tailings pit from all of this stuff that came out of the ground that was polluted. They use millions of gallons more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million gallons more water is wasted in the way that we drill now with fracking. The thing about solar is that every time you put up solar panels on your roof or someone puts it on their building, it makes it cheaper for people in Australia. It makes it cheaper for people in California. Every time Australians, who are really going amazingly fast, they have 15% penetration of solar on their homes now. It's incredible. Residential solar is in Australia like almost nowhere else in a major serious country.
There are, I just want to note, some issues about solar panels in terms of how long they last, if they're recyclable, what their impact on the environment
Sure.
is.
So let's talk about how long they last. Most solar panels were sold with the idea that they'd be around for 20 years.
Right.
The interesting thing is that Goldman Sachs, who know how to make money as well as anyone else on earth, are making money, printing money by owning solar that's more than 25 years old. Right. So it's been fully depreciated, right? All the monthly payments have been paid, and now they're still making money. And what we find is that solar panels after 20 years lose about 1% efficiency. Right. So they actually last longer than the manufacturers say. There's no magic thing that happens at 20 where they suddenly don't work anymore. Right. They still work just fine. And as far as making them, well, I just toured a solar factory today. There are plenty of chemicals and acids that are being made, and they use a lot of silver. The factory I saw today uses 30 kilograms of silver per day in this pasting them all. Right. Yeah, my phone is filled with videos I took of how they make them. But these are very high quality, and in general, there's not a blighted landscape around the factory or anything. I walked around. I was next to a vent from outside, and I went, oh my God, this is the vent.
But there are some problems in the past in manufacturing solar panels that people talk about. Chemicals.
Sure, but they also are the same things. In this studio right now, there are cameras watching us. There are computers just being disposed of. It's not more. So when we're ready to give up servers, computers, electronic cameras, cars, all this, then we can start blaming solar for having these things. But these are all part of our consumer electronics world, and solar photovoltaics are in that class of things. However, there are 7 different kinds of solar, and solar photovoltaics are only one. So there are ways to design architecture to use the sun better. There's solar desalination. There are other things, solar hot water heaters. So almost every home in Israel has a solar hot water heater, and these don't have the same disposal problem. So basically, being good at solar is being able to use clean energy and minimizing use of water, minimizing the pollution of water, the pollution of air.
So I hear you chaired a global summit for scientists, engineers, and government officials to talk about opportunities for innovation, and you're very interested in this potential.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that work and what the potential is for this intersection of engineers and scientists and government officials.
Well, actually, in this millennium, I've chaired 17 conferences that were like that. Right. Most of them related to the new Internet Protocol version 6. However, I also chaired H+ Summit, which stands for Humanity Plus. It's for transhumanists. It's for people who want to extend their lifespan, increase their intelligence, increase their strength, have robots, basically who want to be all that they can be, and who feel we own our bodies. So the first of those was in Southern California, in Irvine. The second one, though, was at Harvard. And transhumanism and H+ was kind of on the fringe, and having this at Harvard made it more mainstream in a way that we didn't expect. So the way we did expect is that we had 60 incredible speakers, including professors from Harvard and MIT and other places. The opening keynote speech was by Stephen Wolfram, who's the creator of Wolfram Alpha and Mathematica, and who has made tools that enable people to be geniuses. And the closing keynote speaker was Ray Kurzweil, who is well known for being the director of engineering for Google right now. So Wolfram and Ray Kurzweil are both friends of mine. I'm very honored to know them. They're there's something called Quora, where you answer questions and answers. And so basically people ask, who are the smartest people you've ever met? So those are 2 of the people on my list. And but the conference theme was Rise of the Citizen Scientist. So now with all this computing power, now with these devices for biohacking and for the quantified self and the activated self, you can go and get your data and you can use it. So somebody went to Burger King and found that the glasses they were giving away were toxic because they took it to their home lab. I want a world filled with people who are amateur citizen science astronomers, or people who are testing the quality of food or water or air. And that is what's going to make a better world. Now, those are the things we expected to have at the summit. The unexpected part is that one of the best-selling novelists of this millennium, Dan Brown, the guy who did the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, these movies with Tom Hanks, saw my flyers that I made for this conference that said H+, and it inspired him to write the novel Inferno, which is about transhumanists going and being a big challenge to the whole world. And so that's how most people have heard about transhumanism and H+, is because of him seeing our flyers for the conference there.
In terms of this solar revolution you were just describing, taking off in places like Australia, looking forward in the near 5-10 years, do you expect an exponential increase? What do you expect to be the rate of this transition?
This is my favorite question, so we're going to get mathematical here. Now, I hope this is, because this is a reflective of Korean values, it's a Korean station. Koreans are very good at math.
They are.
So Koreans will get this, and people who aren't good at math are going to have a big problem with this.
No problem.
So, solar has been around for 6,000 years, but let's start the modern era of making panels cheaper, solar cells and solar panels cheaper.
Right.
Let's start in 1970, $100 a watt. Right. The costs have come down to where they're less than $1 a watt right now, right, on average. It's about 62 cents in Australia. So the cost has come down. Oil has gone up in that period of time. So solar has become more cost effective than oil, compared to oil, by a factor of 5,000 times. Wow. Now there's no way that one thing can get 5,000 times cheaper than another thing over a 45-year period, and that more expensive thing can compete. And that's going to continue by 2020. It's going to be 12,000 times improvement. The first year that solar broke above $1 billion was only 2004. Right. You remember 2004, so it wasn't that long ago. And it was in 2014 that it grew to $100 billion a year. Now let's put this in perspective. The fossil fuel industry, the energy industry, is an $8 trillion a year industry. The transportation industry is a $4 trillion a year industry. We're talking about a little baby industry, but it's a baby that's growing fast. So in 2014, we have $100 billion for solar, $13 billion in the United States. And according to the International Monetary Fund, subsidies for fossil fuels were $5.3 trillion. And yet, solar, even though it's a little tiny baby of an industry compared to fossil fuels, is kicking its butt. And so now what we know is that when things are growing exponentially, if you can find their doubling period if you take 72 divided by that number. So since 1970, solar has had a price performance improvement that is more like 36% per year. The growth is 36%. So let's do the math. In 2014, solar was 1% of our electricity. In 2016, it will be 2%. In 2018, it will be 4%. In 2020, it'll be 8%. Did I get that right? And then 2022, it's 16%. 2024, it's 32%. Now here's what happens when you get 32% of your energy from solar. You wipe out coal. You stop using coal. So we will stop using coal worldwide by the end of 2024. And then 2 years later, we're going to end up at 64% of our electricity compared to 2014 will be from solar. And so we're going to stop using natural gas.
Now it sounds almost like you're suggesting that rather than stop using coal, start using solar.
You are correct. And this is why, while I really love the whole idea of this meeting yesterday, like let's get ready for COP and let's do all these kind of things, you don't actually need for governments to do anything but just stop stopping solar. Right. If you stop stopping solar, if you stop playing games like, oh, solar can happen on Jeju Island, but it can't happen at other places. Right. If you stop that kind of thing, if you stop monopolies from extending their power and crushing small people or making fines or charging them whether they use it or not, there's a whole army of scam tactics used by fossil fuels and traditional utilities. Solar will just keep on doubling every 2 years. The humans can deal with that. We can deal with that. And we end up in a world with 2030 where we have 256% of the electricity produced in 2014, and that will be powering our electric cars. Right. Batteries will have gone down. Batteries are dropping 18% a year in price. The electric cars will fall below the average price of a car, which in America is $31,000. Right. All the cars made will be electric, and they will all be powered by solar, and they'll all be self-driving. And every self-driving car replaces 15 other cars. And that's a world where we've eliminated coal, we've eliminated natural gas, we've eliminated oil, and the air starts cleaning up. We start making the climate so hot, we stop being so sick, our water is clearer, our food is cleaner, and we live in an amazing world. And so this is the world I want. This process has a name. It's called, great, okay. It's called clean disruption. And so what I want is a clean, disrupted world.
Now you've written on this topic, right?
That's actually a book I'm writing. It's called The Clean Disrupted World. So, but I live in it now in my own minds. And just like if you found a phone someplace in Korea where, oh, my phone's not working, I'm already living in that world. And these windows here, they're not coated with a substance that's gathering photons.
Right.
All the windows should be covered with a substance that's gathering photons. We should just cover the whole world in this. Right. That's what we need to do, is just gather all the photons. It's like, imagine we live in a desert and it rains and we have a bunch of buckets. Right. We need to put our buckets outside of our house and catch the rain. Well, we want to catch the photons because the photons are electricity, and electricity is fungible. It can be put into many, many things.
And then a slightly different topic. In terms of young people or children, what do we need to teach them at home about green energy and the importance of these issues?
I think that you need to have K-pop stars going and singing about solar.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I mean, people were talking about how celebrities like solar. Like if you're a cool celebrity, you have solar. Right. I'll give you an example. James Cameron, who is making Avatar movies, and he made his wife, Susie, he made her these giant, beautiful sunflowers. You know, that's kind of like they are, like we were creative in my company in making Evertrees, these solar trees. He's making these solar sunflowers for her school. So we can be creative, we can be makers, we can design new solar things, and you at home can buy kits for your children to try out solar. So every child should have a greenhouse where they're growing plants and seeing how, and every child should have some solar and be able to have a light that's lit by using solar power, and teach the kids that. So when I was on the stage, I asked, please take this plan and send it to all the kids in Korea, all the students in Korea, because they're very smart, they're studying very hard, and they're going to be the ones that need to implement this.
Right. Well, Korea has the best educated people.
And the highest IQ, average IQ. I would like to say this, because I think it's very cool. I would love for nations to compete by trying to raise IQ. So in Korea, the average IQ I've heard is 122. Now, IQ is variable. It can go up or down by 20 points. Right. So what if Korea could raise its average IQ by 20 points? That would be 142. Right. That would be genius level. So the average person would be a genius. I think that would be amazing.
Interesting. What sort of potential to transform Korea?
Yes, and the way to do that is through neurogenesis and these brain training games like N-Back. So you have things like Lumosity, where you can train your brain to be better in at least 6 different specific measurable ways. Right. So when I started using Lumosity, I was about the middle of the pack. And by the time I'd been using it, I was at 99 percentile in all of these things. You can train the brain, and I think that we should.
Right. Well, that's a very exciting sort of a multi-leveled approach to the energy topic and to renewables. And of course, you've managed to touch upon just about every aspect of daily life and potential here in Korea. Do you have any sort of closing remarks you'd like to make about what Korea can do?
Oh, sure. Well, on the bigger picture, there are a few people who said Korea can be a leader in 3G and 4G and in playing StarCraft professionally, StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. And a lot of people said, no, it's impossible, we're too small, we can't this. And the ones who said no about Korea's leadership were wrong. Right. And the ones who said Korea can be the leaders are right. So you know that Koreans are dominating in massively multiplayer online role-playing games and in strategic games. Right. like StarCraft 2 and others. When the people from Activision Blizzard come, they're given a government escort because it's so popular. And that's because Korea has made an architecture with the lowest latency, the lowest delays in the system. And so the architecture that's needed to make this, Korea just has to do what it did with the digital Big Bang and apply it to the green Big Bang. As for my role, Well, I actually like the idea of the Green Big Bang, so I'm going to write a book with that title. And I have offered to people in the government to help them, I'm not asking them for any money for it, to write a national innovation plan that includes these. So I wrote one for United States government, I wrote one for the Mexican government, and I'm writing one for other countries. But I would, if I had a wish, it would be to write the national innovation plan for Korea. That was my goal in coming here, because I want it to be known what Korea can do to reach its full potential and be the best version of itself.
Can you give us a little preview of what might be in that?
So there's the basic clean disruption, and then there's the enhanced version. So the clean version of clean disruption, the basic version of clean disruption is electric self-driving cars with batteries that get ever cheaper, that are using solar and which have an Internet of Things, so that you have information to everything. Everything that costs more than $25 is connected to the internet and making feedback. But then on top of that, you move to liquids that catch photons. So you move to the ability to make food cheaper by making fertilizer cheaper, by making it with air, water, and sunshine, and not using natural gas. These are amazing things. And these are the kind of places where you can take the cost curve. So Moore's law makes computers cheaper, faster and faster. So there's more power in your iPhone than there was in an Apollo launch. Well, Korea, and specifically LG, is now making a mobile phone, a smartphone, that is better than the original iPhone, selling through Walmart for $10. So what I would basically want to do is to say to Korea, now do this for solar. And I was talking to a solar company today and saying, you need to get ready for the world in which electricity is 1 cent a kilowatt hour. Right. If Korea can get there first, Korea can have an explosion of economic growth. The cost to fully make the world clean, this clean disrupted world, is more than $100 trillion. But Korea's GDP right now is $1.4 trillion a year. So if Korea can have the legitimacy by making itself 100% renewable faster, then Korea has the credibility and legitimacy to tell other countries how to do that as well, and can go and double or triple its GDP and make people wealthy and successful, which they should, because they study so hard.
That's very exciting, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.